Welcome everyone to our Hayes High Financial Aid Night. I appreciate you being willing to come out on this cold evening, especially after the Thanksgiving vacation, the Monday right after Thanksgiving. And I'm Kathy Spicer, one of the counselors here. I'm joined by my two colleagues. Both of them are out of the room at the moment, but Sherry Matlock and Sue Stinger, my colleagues, are both here. And then we have some special guests as well. I'll introduce two of them first, and then I'll save the third one till a little later. We have with us Mr. Andy Tinknell, who is the media production specialist at the Center for Teaching Excellence and Learning Technology at Fort Hays State. He'll be taping for Fort Hays. And then for 489 Media, we have taping for us Miss Cassandra Quimby. She's a sophomore in our video production classes here at Hayes High. And I'll leave you in suspense about our guest speaker for just a moment. We're here tonight, obviously, to talk about financial aid for college and technical training. And the philosophy behind financial aid is that families should contribute to the extent that you're able. But also, families are supposed to be accepted in their present financial condition, and financial aid is available if it's needed. And it is our hope that every student who wants to gain more education will be able to achieve that once they leave Hayes High. And so with that, I'm going to turn the program over to Mr. Craig Karlin. He is the Director of Student Financial Assistance at Fort Hays State, and he's going to speak on behalf of all of the financial aid officers across the state of Kansas. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm going to try to go without the microphone. If I have two electronic devices in my hand, it could get messy. So, all right.
You change your mind, just say so.
Yeah, I don't know. My voice might give out. And thank you for that wonderful introduction. And let me iterate a little bit what Kathy had pointed out. Yes, I am from Fort Hays, but we're here to talk tonight about the federal programs, a little bit about state programs and financial aid in general. So what you're going to get tonight is information that you can use no matter where, your son or daughter. I think we even have a few students in the room tonight. Sometimes we don't get a lot of students, but all this information will be designed for the student and for the families, parents, to help them on their quest for college, getting into college, and of course financing college throughout that experience. So a lot of this information will not only work for the first year, but it'll work for the second, third, fourth, and so on down the line. Now, a little bit about the information that we have tonight. The presentation is called What You Need to Know About Financial Aid, and this is designed to kind of, it's some basic information. It's kind of at the 30,000-foot level, though. I mean, we're not going to get into a lot of the nitty-gritty stuff, but we're going to hopefully lay out some good information for you and probably prompt some questions for you. Try to leave a little time at the end of this presentation so that you can ask questions. And of course, I'll stick around after it's all over. If anybody has any very specific questions or personal questions, that sort of thing, I'll be around to help out with that as well. But this presentation is put together and really sponsored by, the presentation itself is by NASFA, which is the National Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators. Probably you've never heard about that, and it's probably the first and the last time that you'll hear about that. We have state organizations that are involved in this too. And in particular, we have CASFA, of course. This is the Kansas Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators. And part of our focus is to get out there and get people informed about how to finance college, what are their options, what are they available for. So I've got to give, I guess, credit where credit is due, and that is to those two organizations that helped get me out here and to you. There we go. Okay, these are the topics we'll discuss tonight. What is financial aid? It's going to kind of get philosophical a little bit. Cost of attendance, big thing. Expected family contribution, EFC. This is your first taste of financial aid and acronyms. We got a lot of them. Financial need, how that is federally defined. We'll go through that here at the beginning. We're going to talk about the categories, types, and sources of financial aid that are out there and that are available. We'll spend quite a bit of time on that. And we'll spend quite a bit of time on the free application for federal student aid, which is the form, the methodology, how all this information comes together, and how we determine the other things that are further up the list there. And then we're going to talk about special circumstances. I'm also going to slide in some information about state of Kansas programs, because we're all probably Kansans here, and give you some good information about that as well. Okay, that first question is, what is financial aid? This is a pretty broad definition, but financial aid consists of funds provided to students and families to help pay for post-secondary educational expenses. A lot of different definitions out there. You probably got one in your mind that you've probably formulated over the years yourself. But financial aid really is just about anything. It could come from parents or grandparents, or it could come from family members, a rich uncle, who knows. But financial aid, whatever it is that out there that the family can use as a resource to go and pay for college expenses, is how we define financial assistance. And all of those things kind of come together in these programs, and we're going to see many points as we go through the presentation. We'll make that point again and again. But some people think that financial assistance is not loans. Well, it is. Some people say, well, that's not financial aid, it's a loan. Well, it's a loan that is specifically for students to attend college. So we consider those things financial assistance. What is cost of attendance? Now, this is really where the basic formula for determining this word that we call need. Again, there's different definitions of need. Everybody probably has their own. But what I'm trying to do here is give you the first component of the need calculation, and that is cost of attendance, or COA as we like to call it. It includes things that you would normally expect, right? Tuition fees, room and board, books and supplies, those sorts of things. You can put in transportation expenses and things of this nature. But it also can include things like loan fees, even study abroad costs right now. Study abroad and that opportunity on college campuses is big now. And that is a part of this. If students need and want and can do a study abroad experience, those things can be included as well, and sometimes we forget about that. There's even dependent care expenses. Now, normally for an 18 to 22-year-old, they're not going to have dependent care expenses, but not always. We know students that are 18 to 22 years old that have children. There's dependent care expenses. What are those expenses? For the student to be able to attend class, as an example, for them to get child care as another example for that. And there are students that are caring for elderly parents, right? They might be coming back to school, that sort of thing. What we're going to find out is that these programs aren't necessarily designed just for the 18 to 22-year-olds that we normally think of college students. Now, I know this is where this constituency is planted, of course, was in that age group. But these programs fit across a lot of different students of all types. Okay? Cost of attendance varies widely from college to college. We're going to have a graph here in a little bit that'll really make that point come home. Okay, what is expected family contribution? This is, it's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Expected family contribution. It's the second part of this formula that we use to determine need. But it is the amount the family can reasonably be expected to contribute. You heard Kathy refer to that a little bit before when she had the introduction. EFC stays the same regardless of college. There are two components, especially for this group. For dependent students, there's the parents themselves and then the students themselves. Calculated using data from the federal application, that is that FAFSA form that we're going to get into about up to the knees tonight. Application form, and it's from the federal formula that drives that. So that's expected family contribution. So you got cost and what the family is expected to contribute to those costs. And that's where you come up with, this is it. This is how financial need is determined. Not just at my school, but at all schools. And I know that you probably think financial aid is very, very, very complicated. And it is. But it all drives off of this. You take the cost of attendance at a school, you subtract out what the family is supposed to be able to contribute, which is defined and determined on that form in the information provided, and what is left over is financial need. This is what every school that participates in these programs will be doing. They're going to take their cost of attendance, their expected family contribution from it, and come up with need. And to the best that they can on their campus resources, the federal funds that are available, all of those types of programs, they will try to fill that need. Okay? Okay. Need varies based on cost. Notice before I talked about cost of attendance really does vary between school. And you know that, right? There are some schools that cost more and some that cost less than others. And you're going to see that. Those are represented over here by the red, yellow, and the 1, 2, 3 red, yellow, and I guess it looks like blue right now, bar there. They can vary between schools, and they always will. Okay? And then you're going to have expected family contribution, which we noted before remains the same. So when you have an EFC at school A that is a certain amount, it's going to be exactly that same amount at school B and school C. Or in this case, school 1, 2, and 3. And you can see pretty quickly here that the expected family contribution doesn't get adjusted just because the cost, the choice of where you're going, those costs might go up. So you can see that expected family contribution is going to cover a lot more expenses in a lower cost school. So this school, school 3, you're going to have lower need. Why? Because you're going to a lower cost school. Now, just because you've got a higher degree of need in school 1 and it's high cost, doesn't mean that the aid programs are necessarily going to pick up all of that extra need based on that choice. But it does mean that there is some consistency across this. This is that expected family contribution. It takes all that information in the federal form, all the data that we put in there, and with all the speed and efficiency, as I like to say, what the federal, you've come to expect from the federal government, it boils it all down to one number, expected family contribution. It takes into account parent income assets and a lot of other things, and students' income assets and several other things, which we'll get into here in a little bit. So you can see all of that. So if we're going to see here in a little bit too, that EFC drives the Pell Grant formula. Okay? Who gets grants? The lower the EFC, the higher the Pell Grant. Okay? So if you get a, let's say, a $5,000 Pell Grant, here at school 1, it's going to be the same $5,000 Pell Grant at school 2 and 3. $5,000 is going to go a lot farther at school 3 than it will at school 1. Okay? So put those things together. This is kind of trying to connect the dots as far as comparing apples to apples. So remember when you're out there looking at schools, you might get a large package either through the federal aid programs, okay, or you might get them through the institutional aid programs at that particular school. But the question is not how much. The question is how much does it cover, okay? So keep those things in mind as you're doing your search, which is probably going on for a lot of you right now. Have you been doing that the whole time?
Most of it.
I thought I was moving this thing, and Andy's back here clicking. Okay. All right. Categories of financial aid. We're going to get into, there's two basic types. As you see up here, there's need-based aid, which you talked a lot about, and there's even some non-need-based aid programs. We're going to talk about both of them. Okay. So in the gift aid area, we have scholarships and grants, as you can see here. Scholarships are everything you normally think of. Remember, scholarships usually means that they have some academic criteria that are tied to it, like a GPA or particular aptitude in a certain discipline, those sorts of things. And grants. Grants are usually not necessarily academic based up front. A lot of times to keep a grant, you need to have a minimum amount of quality work, that sort of thing. But grants are usually defined as strictly need-based. Now, of course, how the world works, we've even got scholarships that masquerade as grants and grants that masquerade as scholarships. Sometimes they have both criteria. But gift aid is what you want. The main operative thing here is you don't have to do anything for. That is, you don't have to show up at a job or you don't have to pay it back with interest, right? So this is what you need to always think about maximizing is scholarships and grants. Self-help aid are things like loans and employment, right? So there's something that the student has to do. They have to borrow money. They have to help themselves by borrowing or to be employed. Those sorts of things when they're on a college campus. We'll get into all those in a lot more detail as we go. So I just hold up my hand like this and
worked pretty well.
Okay, go for it. All right. Gift aid. Money that does not have to be paid back, awarded on the basis of merit, skill, or unique circumstances, usually awarded on the basis of financial need. The one thing about gift aid is you got to heed deadlines. Most gift aid, and for that matter scholarships, are going to be based upon who applies and who does it on time. That is the first criteria that even institutional scholarship programs, and for that matter, many of the federal programs are going to look at. Who's applying, who's doing it right away, and so a lot of these programs are designed to go to the first come, first served. So keep that in mind as we go here too. Okay. And again, they're usually awarded basis of financial need. Okay. Self-help aid, money the students and parents borrow to help pay for college expenses. Repayment usually begins after education is finished, usually, but not always. Only borrow what is really needed. That's a big thing right now. You've heard a lot about how much students are borrowing right now. And look at loans as an investment in the future. Okay? But loans are just that. Loans. They must be repaid with interest, as it turns out. Okay? So loans are a necessity. They're out there. We're going to have more. I'll have more to say about it here in a little bit. But loans are a necessity, and but you should borrow responsibly, always, and do that. As far as them being paid back, usually after their education is finished, in other words, they graduate. But a lot of times students will borrow and not finish school. They still have to repay the loans. So those are one things to always think about. It's an investment, but there is risk involved. Self-help aid for work study and employment. Again, this is a pretty broad category, but allows students to earn money to help pay for educational costs. They get a paycheck instead of a loan or have to pay it back. Of course, they don't have to pay it back if it's work study because they're working for it. Sometimes at some campuses you'll see them get they get non-monetary compensation. So if they're working in a certain place, they might get a reduction of their housing costs or their meal costs or something like that. Okay, next. Okay, the sources of federal or financial aid are the federal government, states. Those are the two big ones, right? Colleges and universities, I guess that's the third one. Private sources, civic organizations, and churches and employers. Now, out of all of that, if you added them all up from all those different sources, this one would probably be 70% nationwide. And of that 70% of that is loans. Okay? So that's what I said before. In many cases, borrowing this day and age, the way these programs are set up, may be an eventuality. States. States kick in a lot for that. We have the state programs we'll see here in a little bit. One thing I think some people forget at times is that the state of Kansas is an example. If you go to a Kansas public school, okay, the state of Kansas subsidizes every student, knocks off about a third of their tuition. if not more in some cases, depending on what type of classes you take. Okay, so you get in-state residency and then pay in-state fees rather than out-of-state fees. Colleges and universities, when you're looking for scholarships, this is the place that you really need to focus in on and laser in on that one. Because there's a lot of organizations out there right now, oh my gosh, jamming up your email and everything else, maybe even in your mailbox these days, about unclaimed scholarships and all of that. And yes, those are out there. There's some national search engines that you can do, and they can pay off. But if you're going to do anything, the school that you're going to is where you want to start your search for any scholarships, is right there. And of course, we know about private sources. There's a lot of them that are out there. Some of them may be in, like we say, churches and civic organizations will have scholarships, and employers, either where the student's working or maybe where one of the parents is working, will have some scholarship programs and grant programs available to their employees or children of the employees. Okay, federal government, as I mentioned before, is the largest source of financial aid. It's awarded primarily on a basis of financial need, and you must apply each year using the FAFSA. And I know the last bullet kind of makes sense, but I wish I had a nickel for every student that forgets to do it their sophomore year. I got to do that again? Yeah, every year. So your sons and daughters are going to be filling out the 15-16 free application for federal student aid. At this time next year, a year from now, they should be really getting geared up to fill out the 16-17 free application for federal student aid. Now think about it. Here we are, 1st of December today. We're not even halfway through 14-15, and we're already talking about 15-16, which, by the way, doesn't start on most college campuses until August. So you really got to do some planning. You got to step back. Procrastination is not welcome here. Okay? We need to get on these things, and we need to start doing them. And again, I'm sorry, I'm warning you right now. I'm going to beat that one to death as we keep on going through here. Okay, Andy, thanks. States, they have residency requirements usually apply. If you're thinking about going out of state to a public institution, many times you're going to have to pay out-of-state tuition. Awarded aid based on both merit and need. We'll see some of the Kansas scholarship programs here in a bit. And they use information from the FAFSA and or state applications. A lot of states determine need based upon the federal formula, is what that's getting at. And deadlines vary by state. In the state of Kansas, our state of Kansas application deadline begins usually, April 1st, I believe. April 1st, and then runs through there. Sometimes they extend it a little bit later and all of that. But the state of Kansas has a state application that is separate from the federal application. And remember, institutions are going to have what? A scholarship application themselves, okay? Are you sick and tired already of filling out applications? Well, if you're not, you will be, because this is how this all works. Most of all these programs are delivered by some sort of application. Okay, thanks. Okay, these are the state of Kansas scholarships. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail about this, but there is a state application for most of these. The one exception is this one up here, the Kansas Comprehensive Grant. That is allocated by the institution itself to Kansas residents through the Kansas Board of Regents. It's available at state schools, and it's also available at public private four-year institutions in the state of Kansas as well. Kansas State Scholarship, that's also available at Kansas Region schools. Kansas Ethnic Minority Scholarship, there's the Career Technical Workforce Grant. This one is really kind of reconstituted from the old Kansas Vocational Scholarship. It got a lot easier to apply, those sorts of things. Kansas Career Work Study Program is another one that's out there that's available on some college campuses in Kansas. And then the Military Service Scholarship is also available as well. There's even some fee waiver programs. There's not a lot of them. Here's dependents and spouses of deceased public safety officers and military personnel, and even former prisoners of war. There are a few schools in Kansas that still have the ROTC tuition waiver program. I think there are 3. Pittsburgh State has an ROTC program, and I think KU and K-State both have ROTC programs available in Kansas right now. No other private schools, at least that I know of, has an ROTC program. Kansas Teacher Service Scholarships, Kansas Nursing Service Scholarships, and Kansas National Guard Educational Assistance Program is also available there as well. Okay. Private sources, foundations, businesses, charitable organizations, deadlines and application procedures vary widely. When you get into some of these things, they will, you kind of want to pull your hair out sometimes because the deadline dates will vary. They don't always just follow the natural progression of the way universities and the federal government has deadlines. You might have a crazy deadline that'll come up in October for the next year, or halfway through the year. They may have a deadline for that year. And you're kind of wondering. So the moral of the story here is on a lot of these things, especially for private sources, and even when I'm talking about the employers and those sorts of things, always keep your ear to the ground because you never know when these things pop up. And sometimes many times when foundations receive money from an settled estate and those sorts of things, they'll come up at odd times. So keep that in mind. Okay. Civic organizations, research what is available in the community. I think, Kathy, you still have some community-based scholarships that are available, maybe to only Hayes High graduates as an example, maybe to only Ellis County graduates is another example.
Those are after the first of the year.
After the first year of the deadlines. Okay. So Kathy's going to keep you, keep the, the information flowing to you. Again, keep your ear to the ground. Application process usually occurs during the spring of the senior year, but that can vary, as I mentioned before, and small scholarships add up. And sometimes people go, I'm not going to fill out an application when it's only $250. Well, hopefully you can get $250, right? Or, it's only $500 or whatever. Small scholarships, they will add up. Okay, keep that in mind as well. Employers, companies may have scholarships available to children of employees, I mentioned before, and companies may have education benefits for their employees. Okay, now we're talking about the federal student aid programs. The federal Pell Grant, Teacher Education Assistance for college and higher education. They had to name it a really funny thing to make sure the acronym came out as TEACH. Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, I don't know how you pronounce FSEOG. Federal Perkins Loan, Federal Work Study, subsidized and unsubsidized loans, and then PLUS loans. We're going to head through all these. Now I'm going to hit them fairly quick, okay? And I don't want you necessarily to you can take copious notes if you want. But we're trying to get you into the idea of what is out there and available in these programs. Okay, Andy, hit it. Federal Pell Grant, I mentioned that one before when I was talking about the cost of attendance and the bar graph and all that. Awarded amount based on the EFC, cost of attendance, and enrollment status. It's different levels according to the lower your EFC, the higher the Pell Grant. It's maxed out this year. We don't know what it'll be for 15-16, but the maximum a full-time student can get is $57.30. $57.30. That will be the same Pell Grant at any institution that you go to if you have a zero EFC and all that. Now, it gradually goes on down. And I think the lowest Pell Grant is it $400 or $800, I think, as it phases out. So as the EFC goes out and then your enrollment level goes down, it will basically phase out. So that's the maximum award. And it's available generally to undergraduate students. There are a couple of exceptions that are so rare, I hesitate to even bring it up. But suffice to say, Pell Grants are available only for your undergraduate work and for your first undergraduate work, okay? So if you got a Pell Grant and you completed a degree and you decided, you know what, I don't like that degree, I'm going to go back and get another one. Well, you can, but once you've got a degree, you can't get a Pell Grant again, okay? So it's only for the first undergraduate degree. Okay. Teach Grant. This is another one. I've got it in here and you need to know about it a little bit, so file this kind of in the back of your mind. I don't think it's a great program for first-time incoming students, or for that matter, sophomores, and maybe even until you get to the junior, senior level. There's a lot of commitment involved with this. This is a difficult one to administer because you've got to figure out if the student qualifies based upon the program not only that they're enrolled in or will become enrolled in, but then the eligibility has to be based upon what the student may or may not do after they get that degree. So you have to have in a high-need field in the teaching profession. And then once you get out, if you got a Teach Grant, you have 4 years that you got to spend in a, highly qualified teacher at a low-income school in a high-need field for 4 years after degree completion. And it's really kind of difficult sometimes. This is a good program for people who know that they're going to be a teacher. They know. And a lot of them are teachers that come back and get a degree. They've already got it. Maybe they're working as a para, and they know that they're going to be in special education, for example, a high-need field. They know that. They've got a position waiting for them back in their school district once they complete a degree. In those cases, it's a great way to go. It's kind of tough to get an incoming first-time freshman to say, okay, sign on the agreement to serve, which, by the way, is a 5-page legal document. And if they don't do that, if they don't complete a degree in teaching and they got the money, or they don't get placed in a high-need field at a school, then at an eligible school, then it turns from a grant to a loan. It reverses over to a loan, and the student has to pay the interest from when they originally got the grant. So I'm not crazy about it for this subset of students. It is a good thing for upperclassmen and that kind of thing, but generally it's one of those things you may want to hold off on a little bit. Okay. FSEOG, Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, has to go to Pell Grant recipients, and it has to go to the neediest Pell Grant recipients. But it is a supplemental grant program that's added on to the Pell Grant recipients. Okay? Now, you got to be an undergraduate, again, just like the Pell Grant, of course, but each school that has and participates in the FSEOG program, they can determine some of the parameters by which these are awarded. So there could be other things. For example, at our school, we never get out of 0 EFCs. Everybody who has a FSEOG at my school, every one of them has a 0 EFC. But if you're at a school that had an FSEO allocation, they may not have that many 0 expected family contribution students that are receiving Pell Grants, so they might be able to get out of that. So it gets a little bit weird. So you get, for example, an FSEOG grant at School A but not at School B. What's up with that? That's why they call it campus-based aid. Each campus has their own allocation with those parameters in place. And depending on the timing, how soon you apply, this is what I was talking about before, that you might be the most eligible person going to a school, and you might have a 0 EFC, but if you applied in April, you're not going to get an FSEOG grant because it already went to somebody else, which is what's required. So keep that in mind as we go through. I'll point out some of these campus-based aid programs as we come through. Okay. Federal Work Study, one of my favorites, provides part-time employment while students are enrolled. Employment may be on or off campus, mostly on campus at most schools. Just about every school that I can think of is going to have some sort of federal college work study program or maybe I should say a student employment program. Even if you don't qualify for work study, okay, which again goes to the needier students, right? That's what's required. You may still be able to have an on-campus job, okay? So a lot of our students are employed as students. They may be funded through other means other than the federal programs, but they're still working, you know, shoulder to shoulder alongside of us in our offices. Federal work study jobs, we couldn't do our work without student help, no question about it. And that's why it's one of my favorite programs. But now's the time to be thinking about that. Where do you want to work? If you wait to get a job until you show up in August, or when you come down to enroll in June or something like that, you might be, your only job might be, what, milking cows at 4 a.m. Not a great place to be. So keep that in mind, you know, as you're going through there. You may not know that you even want to work on campus right now, but you can always be looking out there. A lot of these jobs will start to become available in May and through there as students graduate and come through. Job openings will come open for the incoming students that are coming in August. Okay. Federal Perkins Loan. This is another campus-based aid program. Federal Perkins Loan is really tough to administer. There's a lot of schools getting out of it. And actually, it was the original student loan program. It used to be called the National Defense Student Loan. And it harks back to Sputnik days when this was a response to when the Russians put the Sputnik satellite into orbit. It was originally designed for just science and math. You hear a little bit more about science and math these days, right, Kathy? Yeah, the science and math. But over the years, the name has been changed and the qualifying criteria widened. The big difference here is that every school is going to have a revolving fund at their own school if they participate in the Perkins Loan Program. And if they participate in the Perkins Loan Program, what they'll do is they'll take the money of students who have graduated, hopefully, or whatever, and they're making their payments back. That money revolves around to make new loans to other students. The federal government can't quite figure out what they're doing with this one. Everybody loves the program. It's just that it doesn't fit very well sometimes. A lot of schools can't participate because there's been no new money put into it. The only money that's there is on campuses that have had it, like mine, for years and years and years. So there's no real way to fund Perkins loan programs on other campuses. And the Obama administration's, well, not just the Obama administration, I think every administration since I've been in financial aid 20-some odd years has tried to kill it in some way or another. They're talking about it again. Don't know. But this is another one of those things where you might get a Perkins loan at school A and not at school B. What is going on? Well, the criteria can vary between school to school and application deadlines can vary and all that sort of thing. So a lot of times people are going, why do I get this at one institution and not at another? Don't understand. Okay. Federal direct loans. That's the big gorilla. We got two types, subsidized and unsubsidized. And what's meant by subsidized is the federal government, if you qualify, if you have demonstrated need, right? If you have demonstrated need, you can borrow up to certain amounts. We'll see those in a second, depending on your grade level. Okay? And it can be all or part of it subsidized, which means that the federal government pays the interest on that loan while the student is enrolled half-time or better. Notice how I did not say until they graduate, because not all students graduate who borrow. But once they drop below half-time, they'll go into repayment on that. Now, they're not responsible for the interest while they were in school, enrolled half-time or better. The federal government pays the interest while they're in school. So when they go into repayment on a subsidized loan, let's say it all works out great, which it does a lot of the time, of course, they graduate, they have a 6-month grace period, and the loan is amortized over the period of what the repayment is, and they can vary between 10 and 30 years, depending on how much they have. And that loan then, so they pay the interest after their grace period and when they're in repayment on that. But while they're in school, they don't pay it. That's what they mean. That's what the subsidized and subsidized direct loan means. Now, unsubsidized is, well, of course, yeah, they can qualify for an unsubsidized loan. It's not necessarily based on need. Most students can apply regardless if they have no need, in many cases, okay, federally defined need. But if they borrow through the unsubsidized loan program, then the interest, while they don't have to pay the interest is accruing on their account. So if they borrow an unsubsidized loan as a freshman and they took 5 years to get through school, okay, they don't have to make the payments until 6 months after their 5th year or they graduated. But the interest between when they first got it and back here is accruing and generally capitalized annually for whatever interest is accrued on that particular loan for that particular year. So if you get an unsubsidized loan and you remain in school for a long time, interest is going on that. So those old loans are accruing interest as you go. Okay? If you borrow an unsubsidized loan, the last semester of your senior year, there's not going to be a lot of interest accrued on that loan because you're closer to graduation and you're closer to repayment. Okay? All right. Okay, direct loans. These are the annual loan limits that I was talking about. So see there for classification, we have the freshmen, and these are across the country. It doesn't matter where you go. If you're a freshman, you can only borrow, and most of them are dependent students, $5,500. We do have freshmen that are independent, and we'll get into the who's dependent and independent in a little bit. But generally, if you're over the age of 24, or you have dependents, or if you're married, or if you're a veteran, those sorts of things, you'll be independent, even though you may still be an incoming freshman student as far as the number of credit hours attained. But for the most part, we're talking right here. So their sophomore year, they kick it right up to $6,500 and then $7,500. Think about that. Think about if you go to a high-cost institution where easily these days you can pay $30,000 in tuition alone. You might get a, what, $5,700 Pell Grant, and you might get a $5,500 subsidized loan. That's not going to go very far on tuition. That's what I've been talking about, is that unmet need. Make sure you're looking at that. How much is this going to actually cover of the expenses that I have? Okay. And sometimes you'll go to a low-cost school and they can't afford $5,500 because you don't have $5,500 worth of need in the loan program. They go, they cheated me. They're only giving me a $4,000 loan. This other school gave me a $5,500 loan. What's going on with that? Well, that's a good thing, right? It is a good thing because that's $1,500 that you don't have to pay back with interest, okay? And those sorts of things. So keep those things in mind as you go through here. Even though you may go to a high-cost institution, it doesn't necessarily mean that the federal programs are going to kick in. Now, there is a federal program that will kick in. The parents, you'll be happy to see this here in a little bit. So I'll just leave that one for right now. Okay, the current interest rate for 14-15, it won't be set until July 1st, so we don't know the interest rate for your sons and daughters yet, but it's 4.66 right now. It's linked to the July 1st T-bill, and we'll know more about that right before they come back to school. Here again, repayment begins 6 months after grace period, and maximum repayment period between 10 and 30 years. When I was paying back my student loans, it was only one payment period, 10 years. That's it. Yeah, 10 years. Now you can stretch it out over a longer period of time. And all of us who borrowed before, right, we know about time and interest and money and those sorts of things. Yeah, you might have lower interest rates or lower monthly payments on a 30-year program, but think about the total cost of the loan over time. Time value of money. Okay. Plus loans. This is what I was talking about before. So you have a student, they want to go to a high-cost school, and they might have a little bit of remaining need after all the programs kick in, their scholarships or whatever. So let's say they've got $20,000 of what we call unmet need. And that can happen pretty easily depending on the student and where they're going. Well, the parents can borrow that through the plus loan. Used to call parent loan for undergraduate students, but it doesn't mean that anymore because they made graduate students eligible for plus loans that are neither undergraduate nor necessarily are they parents. But plus loans have expanded to graduate students now. And you take the cost of attendance at a school, you subtract out the aid that they're getting, and that's what you can borrow. Okay? So if you go to, you know, gosh, I saw one the other day. It's in New York. Sarah Lawrence College. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Sarah Lawrence College. I think traditionally it is an all-female school. I think they're co-ed now. But their tuition alone is like $46,000 a year. And then add in another, you know, $12,000 of living expenses. So it's a pretty good price tag. So what you could do is you could get that maximum Pell Grant and get a maximum subsidized loan for the student. So, but it's out there, it's available for those things. You need to know that, but you know, those are very personal issues for you. And you have to look at that in a greater sense to see if that is going to be doable for parents to be able to borrow that kind of money. Repayment begins immediately, but can be deferred upon request. For 14-15, the interest rate was 7.21. They don't give you quite the break on interest rates they do to students. If the parent is unable to borrow or denied for a plus loan, the students can borrow as if they were independent. Remember that second column about independent ones was about $4,000, I think, higher than the dependent student column. So you can borrow as an independent student, but you can't borrow nearly. The student won't have access to funds nearly as much as they would if the parents were helping out with plus. Okay? We always used to call plus loans the loan of last resort. What I believe parents and students should do is if they're going to borrow, they should maximize what they need through the student's loan borrowing eligibility. And yeah, you may have to go to plus, but remember, just because you have the eligibility to borrow all of that money doesn't mean you actually have to borrow all that money. Eligibility is different from what is, how should I say this, financially wise. Okay. All right. Next one. Free application for federal student aid. Finally. Okay. FAFSA. Free application for federal student aid. It's the standard form. We're going to shift gears here if you haven't figured that out already. But it's a standard form that collects demographic and financial information about the student and the family. Okay. May be filed electronically or using a paper form. And you know what? Paper forms are scarce as hen's teeth. Do you even have a paper form here? No. Okay. You get the idea that they want you to do it online, just like all scholarship applications, the federal applications for admission of every sort and variety and whatever are typically done now online. No big revelation, I'm sure, to everybody here. Andy, if you could. Information is used to calculate the expected family contribution. I mentioned that before. And then colleges use the EFC to award financial aid. It may be filed at any time during the academic year, but no earlier than January 1st prior to the academic year for which the student requests aid. So for 15-16, that means that they're going to make the site live on January 1st, 2015. You will probably be doing other things on January 1st. But we do have literally students that apply on January 1st at 1 tick past midnight. I mean, as they're singing Old Lang Syne, I don't know. But you can apply that early. And early bird does get the worm in these things. And applying early really will do two things for you. It'll give you first crack at the funds that you may be eligible for, but you don't necessarily know yet, okay? And it'll give you peace of mind of knowing where you stand financially. And that's the big thing. Don't wait around until May, June, July, August, September, those kind of things. We still have students applying for fall aid now. Not a great thing. If they're the neediest student in the world, all the aid that they could have been awarded if they had applied early has been out the door to other people by then. Okay, here's the one thing to keep in mind. Most colleges have FAFSA filing deadlines. They call them priority deadlines. Now, you can fill out the FAFSA all the way through the award year. You can start as soon as January 1st, long before the semester or the term starts for the fall. Okay? You can do all of that. But most colleges set their filing deadlines anywhere from February 1st to March 15th. I haven't seen a lot of them past March 15th. A lot of them in schools in Kansas go with March 1. Okay? Now, priority deadline is just that. It's just a priority. It's generally speaking, the students who apply by their priority deadline, there will be funds left over for them if they're eligible for some of those campus-based aid funds and even their institutional funding and that sort of thing. So it will do a lot of things for you if you apply early. And we're going to go into some detail here about what it means to apply and how complete the application needs to be. But keep in mind, colleges, and they will vary. What I tell students now, you may not have your mind made up exactly where you're going. That is okay. But if you apply earlier, you've got all the levers in place that you can make better decisions, okay? So if they at least know they're going to college or technical school or some other post-secondary education experience, fill it out as soon after January 1st as you can, and that will help out a bunch. Okay. All right, FAFSA on the web, as I mentioned before, www.fasfa.gov is the website. For some of you, you may have done this when you were undergraduates. Some of you, probably like me, remember the old bubble forms. This is before it was written, right? The old bubble forms. So that dates me a little bit. Oh, wow, sorry about that. But it's all done online now. Now, there are some advantages to doing this online, but there is a FAFSA on the web worksheet that I probably need to point out. It's a paper version. It used to be pretty good when you couldn't save a lot of the stuff, and the FAFSA on the web didn't have skip tracing and things of this nature, and it followed the printed version of the FAFSA, which, as we said before, really doesn't even exist anymore. So I've told people to just get online, fill out what you can, get the account started. It's always going to be saved there. You can get back in and do all that. So use the web version as your worksheet until you can get all the way through it. But they do have worksheets that are available. Here we go. Why use FAFSA on the web? There's built-in edits to prevent costly errors. And you know, back in the day when we had to have them Scantroned in with a number 2 pencil and all of that, wow. And then when we relied on handwriting, never mind. It was a lot of errors in there, and it was just a lot of follow-up. Now, what happens now is that, for example, if the student says that they're under the age of 24, then they're going to get the parent section. Okay, if they're not independent, they're going to get the parent section of it. If they say that they're married, they're going to get the independent part of it. And so you answer a lot of those questions up front, and then it pre-builds your form with the sections that you don't need to fill out, you never see. Okay, that's what they mean by the skip logic as you're coming through there. This is probably one of the best things that happened to simplifying and making the FAFSA more user-friendly in forever. And it's the option to use the Internal Revenue Service data retrieval tool. So what you can do is you can go out there and fill out your application. If you have your taxes filed, and even if you don't, you can go out there and fill out the FAFSA application. You can put in that you will file, and then once you do file, you can come back into the application and pull your information over from the IRS data retrieval tool. It works really nice. When it works good, it really works nice. When it doesn't work good, it is a real bear. And I almost let an expletive slip there. But I'll tell you, it's pretty nice, but when it doesn't work, we got some other issues that schools and students and parents have been dealing with the last couple of years. But it has gotten a lot better since the first year of implementation, which was 2 years ago. Last year we had a pretty good year. We hope to see another good year coming up. Now, the IRS data retrieval tool will not be, you can fill out the FAFSA and you can estimate what you will be paying in taxes on the actual FAFSA application. You can do that in January 1st and thereafter. And I think the data retrieval tool isn't available until sometime in February, I believe. I think I might have the date in here as we go through. But you have to wait a little bit, right? Okay. But don't let the idea that waiting for your taxes to either complete them or for the IRS to make them available with the data retrieval tool, do not let that hold you up from applying. Okay? Because all of that, once you initially do that, even if you don't have your tax information in there, even if you estimate, or even if you say you will file, your date of application will be that date, not when the other stuff is backfilled in. Okay? Keep that in mind. It's a really important part of this. We have parents that kind of have a knee-jerk response, say, I haven't got my taxes done. Oh my God, I'm filing an extension. I'm not going to get my taxes done until May. No. We do that just as soon as you can. And the rest we can backfill in there as time goes on. Other things in here, more timely submission of original application and necessary corrections. You can do it a lot quicker. More detailed instructions and help for common questions. Ability to check application status as you're going through there and to update it. Simplified application process in the future. And they're even talking about, get this, they're even talking about having the FAFSA application to be 2 questions. What's your adjusted gross income and how many people are in your family? And one of them they can answer from the IRS. No kidding. They're talking about that right now. It's kind of pie in the sky stuff. And it underscores the idea of how much information is out there, right, that you don't necessarily need to provide. So how do you feel about that? But that's one of the directions that we're going there, simplifying even more. I answered 215 questions on bubble forms, and we get down to 2 questions. Great. Yeah. Okay, a little more about the IRS retrieval tool. While completing FAFSA on the web, applicant may submit a real-time request for IRS tax data. That's the idea, and move it over. IRS will authenticate the taxpayer's identity. If the match is found, the IRS sends real-time results to the applicant in a new browser window. The applicant chooses whether or not to transfer the data to FAFSA on the web. So if you bring it over from the IRS and you choose to use it, it puts it in there and says it's in there. And you can't change it then, okay? Because what the other thing that this does is this information comes directly from the IRS. You can, if you would happen to be selected for verification, which we used to do with tax returns and W-2s and all of that wonderful stuff years ago. Some of you are shaking your head, oh, I remember that. We won't have to do that. But you've got to move it from FAFSA on the web and not change it. And so that information, therefore, is verified once it gets pulled over from the IRS and gets put into your application. They give you the chance to change it. I don't know why you'd want to, but they do give you the chance to make it off or not. I'm not exactly sure why they do that, but they do. Okay. Here it is. Available early February 2015 for the 15-16 processing cycle. Participation course voluntary. If you can't do the IRS data retrieval tool, there's a slide that we'll show here in a little bit. We can do a tax, what is called a tax transcript. We can do that as well. But what they're trying to do here is get away from photocopies of tax returns. A school cannot accept a photocopy of your tax return anymore, even if they can't. They need either a tax transcript that comes through the IRS, or they need this data retrieval tool thing to work. Okay? In other words, it has to be, so what, I think you know what was happening nationwide is a lot of people were dumbing up tax returns and handing them into financial aid offices when it was all fabricated information. So doing away with that paper, it has to all go through some way, be filed with the IRS and verified there. Okay. Here's the folks that can't use it. Filed an amended tax return. No Social Security number was entered. That can happen, especially for non-resident aliens in certain instances. Students or parents married but filed separately. A joint return, fine, but if it's filed separately or is head as a household, can't do that. Okay, here's the PIN process, which we'll see in a minute. It's kind of changing a little bit, but in order to what we call e-sign, you need a PIN number, and your PIN number acts as e-signature. So the student needs one because they're filling out their application. So the student needs to sign it. And then at least one of the parents needs to sign it. That's providing and is required to provide information on the application itself. So you sign the FAFSA using a PIN number, and that's something you can do right now. Some of you might have PIN numbers left over from when a sibling was in, one of the student's sibling was in school, as an example. Or maybe when you were filling out a FAFSA. I mean, those PIN numbers are still good, and you can still use them. They can be activated and use them. So one of the parents and one of the students. Now you can go out to this PIN website, go to FSA, Free Application for Federal Student Aid, .org, okay? FAFSA.gov, not org. Go out there and you can get to the PIN website. It shows it right there. Click on it. You'll put in your information. It'll verify your identity through this Social Security Administration and issue you a 4-digit PIN number. And you can take it, you can have it, and that's your homework right now. Now, you can't use it to fill out a FAFSA because it's not active until January 1st. But you can do this. You can get that done, get this step taken care of. Now again, right when we're getting all set and ready to go with this, they're going to be changing a little bit, but we'll get to that in a second. Aha! FAFSA is adopting the best practices of using a username and password instead of personal information. So they're changing it up a little bit. They don't like the idea that for you to sign in, either the student and the parent, that each time you sign in, you have to provide your Social Security number over the web again. Now, it's all secure, but they don't want another chance of your personally identifiable information to be able to get out there over the internet, okay, as you're signing in. So what they're going to do is link all that behind the scenes, and you can use your PIN number up until April 25th. Okay, now, I hope you all have PIN numbers before then. Don't wait until April 25th to fill out the FAFSA. Why? Because most deadlines are March 1st or before. That is priority deadlines. But after the 25th, which is after tax day, around April 15th, they will do that cutover. You can still use the PIN number, and when you log in after the 25th, there's going to have a different login screen. Can you go to the next screen for me, Andy? I think it's a few more down. Keep going. I might be wrong about it. Back up to where we were before, I'm sorry. We'll see that here in a little bit. But, so anyway, you'll go back in, you'll link your PIN number behind the scenes back through it, and you will have an ID and your own password instead of a PIN number, Social Security number, and date of birth. Okay, so that's how they're switching that up a little bit. But do not let that dissuade you in any degree or shape or form from going out and getting a PIN number and using that to apply as soon after January 1st as possible. I told you I was going to hound you to death about that. Here you go, another example. Okay. What happens for the new, see, we're probably going to be new users here. Registration requests same required information as PIN to set it up initially, and then users will be directed to the registration page to create a FAFSA ID username and password, as I mentioned before. Oh, here's that FAFSA on the web worksheet again. Again, it's available out there on FAFSA.gov, but I really wouldn't use it. I would use the application itself. Go in there and set up the student's account and use the actual online form as your worksheet, because the instructions are so much better if you do it that way, and the skip logic and all that. Okay. No, here's that screen I was talking about before. So here's the student's first name, last name, social security number, and date of birth. That is put in there. That just gives you the login information. Okay. Next page. Not a lot of screenshots on here, and the reason is because they're kind of hard to see. How did they come out in your handout, by the way? Is it, do you need reading glasses? Yeah, a little blurry. Yeah. I had a lot more screenshots in here, but they just don't do well. And to tell you the truth, FAFSA on the web is very intuitive. It's a lot more user friendly. And by the time I sit up here and point around to it, once you get in there and you get your account set up, it really does take you through so much better than what I could explain up here. But this is a confirmation page, so this is what you would get at the end after you're done. It's confirming that your application has been submitted. There's two red arrows up here. One of them is, does your brother or sister need to complete a FAFSA? So instead of parents going out there and doing it again, and I do know that there are people in here that have or will have two people in college at the same time. So if you fill one of them out, you can go back and say, oh, well, this is me, this is my parent information. Now take all that and put it over here on the second child. Okay? Nice little feature they added in, I think. Oh, and there's the second arrow refers to start your state application. And when the state of Kansas has that available, you don't have to come back here to get to the state of Kansas state application. But they put the deadlines and things in there as well. And it'll cut you over so that you can do that. And they provide a bunch of other stuff. This is where they'll talk about the schools that you listed, gives you some basic information about that school that you may have listed, places you want it sent when you're in there. And I think you could choose up to 7 or is it 10, I think, schools now. I mean, you can do that. I wouldn't recommend it because you're going to get a lot of stuff. You know, I always tell folks is, you know, try to get it down to 2, 3, you know, outside maybe 4, something like that. Because if you go more than that, again, it'll get a little bit crazy. And then again, if you chose 3 and those are all out the window, you can always go back in here and add a school on the fly. So no problem with that. Okay, Andy. Frequent FAFSA errors, social security numbers. You would be surprised how many people get their social security number for themselves, that is for the parent, or for their student, exactly wrong. It happens all the time. And, you know, just trust me, don't do that. Get it right. Make sure you put it in there. Transpose numbers, you know, common errors and mistakes, what happens with that. Divorced and remarried parental information. The example that I always like to give is how do you define the family, okay? Mom and dad are married. Okay, Kathy, I'm sorry you've heard this how many times before. It's just as fresh as the first time I said it. Okay. Mom and dad are married. Mom and dad get divorced. They have 2 children. 2 children go to live with mom. Okay, great. Mom gets remarried. Dad has 2 children that are living with him. In the meantime, Dad, right, not stepdad, but Dad back here gets remarried, and his wife has 3 children that are living with him now. How big is the family? Anybody want to venture a guess? Anybody? Nobody? I gave you. I'll give you a hint. I gave you some information that you don't need to know. Okay. Okay. 2 kids went with mom. Mom got remarried. Okay. Her new husband, that is the student that's going to school, the stepdad, has 2 children of his own that are living in the family now. So there are how many kids? 4. And then there's mom, 5, and stepdad, 6. Okay? 6 people in that family. What's going on back here, because the kids are now living over here with mom and the stepdad and their step-siblings. It doesn't matter what's going on over here with the biological father in this case. Okay? And this whole thing about defining parents is becoming a little bit weird. You're going to find, if you fill this thing out before, you're going to find a big difference. Instead of saying mother, father now on this form, it says parent 1 and parent 2. Not a big stretch for anybody in here, I know, but it has to be that way because the DOMA, Defense of Marriage Act, was struck down so that you can, it's possible in some states to have a same-sex marriage. Okay? So now they refer to the parents as parent 1 or parent 2 instead of mother and father. Okay? That can be a bit confusing. So you might go in there and go, and you know, people are worried that if you say mother, we know that that is back to one particular person, but parent 1 may be mom or dad, and parent 2 may be mom or dad, right? So the designation does not indicate whether it's a mother or father now. So it makes it parent 1 and parent 2, it's androgynous. So that can throw things a bit. And we're wondering exactly what's going to be happening here about how that's all going to be coming into place. But this is the first year of it, so I would expect a few hiccups with it, to say the least. But that is the change in terminology that's on the federal application. You need to be aware of that because some of you who've been through this before might go, what in the world just happened? Okay. Income earned by parents and step-parents. Okay? That's income earned by parents and step-parents. Remember, step-parents are generally going to be part of the equation. Untaxed income. A lot of times people say, that's not what I paid in income tax that pulled over from the IRS data retrieval tool or that shows on my tax transcript. A lot of people want to put down, instead of income taxes paid, they want to put down income taxes withheld. What's withheld is not what your tax liability is. Okay? So a lot of times that happens. Okay. Household size, as we said before, blended families, and some of the definitions of parents now are, kind of muddy the water a little bit. Number of household members in college. You can count the dependent students that are going, but you can't count mom or dad. That was another change. But it is rather common that maybe son or daughter's going off to college and maybe dad's in college again, getting retrained or something. Now, you can't count dad as a member of the member in college. But when dad would fill out the FAFSA, as an example, he would count himself as in college on his FAFSA and the son or daughter. Okay? So that's a crazy little thing too. Real estate investment net worth. There's a difference about how much real estate is worth, and remember, you need to make sure that if you have real estate investment, if you do have to provide asset information, for example, maybe it's a rental home or a second home or something like that, if you have that, it's not what it is worth, it's what is the net value is. So the value of the property may be, let's say if it's a rental, $70,000, but you owe $40,000 of it. So the net worth is $30,000, and that's what you would use on that asset instead of the $70,000. Okay. FAFSA processing results goes to central processing systems, notifies the student of the FAFSA processing results by what's called a student aid report. Paper student aid reports are fairly scarce as well, as is the paper FAFSA. But suffice to say, if you go on there and you provide an email address for the student, that is how they'll get there. They'll get an electronic link back to the FAFSA.gov. They'll click on that and they'll be able to sign in and they'll be able to see an electronic version of their student aid report. Some of you may remember, I know I did, when you got all that stuff through the mail. Now it's pretty instantaneous. Let's see, SAR acknowledgement. If I file a FAFSA on the web and the student's email address was not provided. So there is still a little bit of paper if you don't have an email address out there. I would use on the FAFSA for the student, I would use a how should I put this? An email address that is active and people are looking at it, right? I think it's for my own kids. I think each of them have at least 2 or 3 email addresses, and I don't think they check any of them maybe once in a blue moon. I mean, hardly at all. But email is the way that the federal government will correspond with you and send this information. So I know what a lot of parents do, especially of that, this age group, is they might put mom or dad's email address in because you guys are old stodgy people and you still use email. Whatever, okay? So keep that in mind. Use a good, solid email address. Processing results. Here's that email notification again. And students with a pen may view the SAR online at FAFSA.gov. I mentioned that before too. You can breeze through this one. The institutional student record information is sent to the school. By the time that you submit that, let's say you do it on January 10th, you submit that. It's going to send you back, if you have an email address, it's going to send an email. It's going to send a link back in an email to the email address that you provided on the FAFSA, and it's going to say, hey, we're going to be sending this information on to your schools. And that's all fine and good, but most of the schools won't probably do much with that application information. They're lining you up by when you're applying, don't get me wrong. But they probably won't be doing much with it until they can go into what we call in the financial aid world, is until we can go into production, we can start packaging and doing all that. A lot of that's based upon what they know, if we know what the funding sources are, and sometimes that depends on what Congress is up to at any particular time. So a lot of times, schools, probably the earliest that you'll hear from schools probably around March 1. But usually it's anywhere from March 1 to April 1. It's when you start hearing from the schools. Because you send this in January and you're like, okay, there's nothing going on. Some schools will correspond. You say, hey, yeah, thanks for your application. We, haven't got our funding levels yet. We, got your application. We're thinking about you, but we probably won't be going into production. You won't hear anything back from us for a few weeks yet, or a month, or whatever. But they're getting in there in the order which they received. Eventually, what's going to happen is college is going to review the ISAR, and then we request additional documentation. A lot of times this is for verification purposes and all of that. Verification is by which the information that you submitted on the application is verified. And schools are going to verify income, asset information, number in family, number in college, those sorts of things. If you use the data retrieval tool, it cuts out most of those, except for family size, which they can collect usually on a verification worksheet, which they send to you, you fill out, You provide some other information on there, and then you can send that back through, and it goes a lot quicker. Now, in the old days, when we had to verify all that income information from W-2s and tax returns, ugh. So things got a lot better. I think it's got a lot better for the students and the families, for sure. Okay. Let's see. Student aid report, review the data for accuracy and correct any errors. A lot of times when you bring it back, I had a student the other day that was such in a hurry because they're so late filling out the FAFSA that they put down that their parents earned $400,000. Ooh, it was 40,000 something. A little heavy on the old zero there. Okay? Don't want too many digits. You need to review it and say, oh, okay, well that makes sense. This is right. You can update the estimated tax information when actual figures become available, as I mentioned before. Andrew. That's how you make corrections. You go right back out there, you sign in. It talks about the paper process here, but submitting the documentation to the college's financial aid office is the way to go. And what they do is they collect all that information, they get the file going, and then they pass it off to the school or schools that you indicated there, and then they'll start going through that processing cycle at their school. And it can vary a little bit as you're going through. So if you put down, 5 different schools, be prepared to get 5 different award letters and 5 different requests for information. And you're asking yourself, do I need to do this 5 different times? In some cases you would, but by then you might be able to say, no, I'm not considering your school, whatever. And you can do that as you go. Don't let that, talk you into the idea that you need to make a decision about which school to go to in January and February and March. Leave it open a little bit. You can always, turn down the aid or notify the school that you're not going there, or notify a school that you are going to go there, and you made your decision. Special circumstances, going to hit this because there's almost always something. I mean, we process a lot of special circumstances. But they are special situations that don't come through on an application. It doesn't ask you about if there is somebody that is fighting cancer and you have monumental medical bills, or somebody lost their job the other day, not the last tax year in 14, as an example. So when these things happen, you've got to make contact with the financial aid folks at the school that you're going to attend and go to. I'll give you some examples here on what most schools use as special circumstances, where they'll go in and they'll make adjustments because somebody did get sick, somebody did lose their job, somebody has to commute farther because their job now resides 60 miles away and they have to commute every day. Things like that. Okay. And it varies a little bit between colleges. Some colleges, I don't know of one, but I guess it's possible. Some colleges won't do special circumstances. I don't know of any personally. But for example, some schools might adjust for certain things, and then other schools will not adjust for that same thing. An example of that would be secondary school expenses. If you go to a private prep school, as an example, some schools won't adjust for that. Other schools will. So it just depends on the school. But about everybody's going to do medical expenses and loss of income through job and that kind of thing. Oh, here's change in employment, unusual medical expenses, change in parental marital status. Oh yeah, somebody gets divorced. Unusual dependent care expenses, and the student cannot obtain parental information. That's another one. Caution, avoid being charged a fee to file free application for federal student aid. Completion and processing of the FAFSA are free. Did you notice I slipped up before and I said FAFSA.org? Do not go there. X, no. Negative, no. FAFSA.gov is where you need to go. FAFSA.org will charge you, I don't know, 50, 100, could be 1,000 by now for all I know. But they feel so strongly that it should not cost you anything to file this form, that the first word in the name of the form is free, okay? Don't ever let anybody charge you for filling out a free application for federal student aid. Now, a lot of times they go out there and you put all the information in because they look a lot like the federal site. And you get down to the end and they want your credit card and you blithely do that. And I've seen it a lot. And it can happen. But, you know, now that you're here, you won't do that. Okay? So stay away from it. It's FAFSA.gov. Okay? Where do you go from here? Well, go through the process. I'm sure a lot of you probably started this already, but obtain and review admissions and financial aid websites and materials for each school for which you're applying. Meet all the application deadlines. Complete the FAFSA and other application materials. Submit all requests, follow-up documentation when those get out there, and investigate all sources of aid. Okay? You got to get in the zone, right? And this is time. You're not late for anything. You're not late for a single thing that I could think of right now. A lot of financial or for scholarship applications, some of their deadlines are passed. So some of those are coming up right after the first year. January 15th, February 15th are popular institutional scholarship deadlines. But you're not late. In fact, you're fashionably ahead of schedule when you're talking about the federal aid programs, because you really can't do anything until after the first of the year. Oh, College Goals Sunday. We will have College Goals Sunday. That will be coming up. It's February 22nd, as it says here, 2 to 4, and it will be at the Hayes Public Library. And this is a whole bunch of computers, a whole bunch of financial aid dorks like myself. We get in there, we tell you and help you through the whole application process. Yes, you can apply for, or sign up for, I guess, for a scholarship drawing. This is put on by our friends at the Kansas Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators. We've been doing this for quite some time, but it is, again, the FAFSA on the web is fairly intuitive, but you're going to have some questions, and we can help you out with that. And this is a special day set aside from 2 to 4. What we do is we bring students in, set them down, help them get their accounts set up, help them get the information in there, and help them get going, take that first step forward on that FAFSA journey. Now, you don't obviously have to come there and actually do that. Just general questions and things of this nature as well. But it's going to be for Hayes. There's, I think, 19, 20, maybe even more sites around Kansas. Hayes is one of them. And again, Hayes Public Library, 2 to 4 on the 22nd. No. That's interesting. There you go again. Oh, there's the $500 scholarship drawing. That will be there. Questions? Not sure what happened there, folks. Anybody have any general questions? Yes?
If you go to school during like the intercession, do you have to fill out another FAFSA, or do you?
Intercession?
Yeah.
Are you talking about Fort Hayes? Okay, no, you don't. It'll be part of the 14-15 award year, which is actually tacked on to the spring 15 semester. So you have is it you or is it high school students? 3? Oh, you have 3 in college. Oh my gosh, let's give her a round of applause. Wow. Yeah. Yeah, there's you just need to take an in-session class and then start communicating with you about how to make all that fit together. So, pretty specialized on the intersection stuff. Anybody else have any questions? Come on.
How many would you put, so my kids have joint custody, so how would that household work?
It depends on the litmus test that it'll tell you in there when you're trying to figure out who's in the household is where do the children spend the majority of the time when they do. Well, when they get split right down the middle, what I tell folks is pick one. It would probably be a pretty good idea to pick the parent of that has a lower income. Probably. Be the way to go. Okay. Yes.
Could I make a couple of announcements?
What do you guys think? Should we let her make some announcements? Okay.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to mention that regarding the scholarships, there was a November scholarship calendar put out on the 19th. I sent it to all the students, and it's on the website. We put it in Hayes High Happenings so that you would know to go look for it on the website. I'll put a December calendar out before we leave for the holidays. I wanted you to know that. And regarding the email for FAFSA, and you said use one that's going to be used and in place for a while, by all means, don't use your school email, because seniors,
That is your Hayes High.
the Hayes High email goes away.
Does
just a
that
few
get
weeks
inactivated once?
after they graduate, and so you don't want to use that email. That was another little announcement, and then we have a link to the FAFSA website also under the counselors page on our school website. And a little tip for working on campus, especially since you all are from Hayes. Some of the jobs that the campus needs filled appreciate having those workers in the summer, not just having them in from September to May. And so if you are interested in a job on the campus, they should let that be known, shouldn't they, Craig? Because then the thinking being that Hayes kids will still be here in the summer, whereas some students who come in from other places may go back to their hometowns over the summer, and you often need workers in the summer.
Yeah. For kids that attend Fort Hayes,
Yes, that's what I meant.
It's difficult. We need more student help during the summer, and sometimes that's hard to do because, well, if people are going away to college, and of course, if you have Hayes kids, then at least maybe for their first or second year, they're around.
Right.
A little bit later, sometimes not so much. But, they'll be off doing other things, maybe internships.
Oh, and the one last thing I was going to mention, that state application, as far as I know, isn't available yet. It's usually not available till after the first of the year.
Yes.
And so when it's available, we will let you know, because he did go through that fast, because otherwise we'd have been here for another hour. And so we'll try to give you some tips on that once it comes out.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll be around here if you have any other questions that you want to ask me specifically.